So, what are you going to do?
I'll do what I always do. I'll stand and fight.
All right, we are in there. So
Yeah.
how's everything, man?
I'm great. I got like a bunch more viewers this time than I usually do. I don't know why, but yeah. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. You mean you got people watching on your end, like streaming on your end?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna live stream it. What I do is I usually record it and then I'll add like some like whatever pictures in the background and just
Yeah.
edit out the junkage and then from start to finish. If I was doing an official debate, I was under the influence that we were doing sort of a conversation style, more just shooting back and
Yeah.
forth the ideas. All right, so because I mean once we came to that conclusion, I sort of just eased up on the prep. So I was like,
hmm
I figure we could just have a regular sort of conversation about it and see where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, that
Um,
sounds like a good idea.
awesome. All right. Well, I am Jason Zem from You2oneDay, and I'm here talking with Anarcho Alex. Is that how you'd like to be referred?
Sure, you could just call me Alex though. I think Anarcho's Alex is just kind of a cringy name, but I went with it.
We're all a little cringe every now and then. So,
Yeah.
but yeah. So you can refer to me to Jason. That's fine. Okay. So where do you want to begin?
Um, uh, I was under the impression that we would be doing like opening statements. Do you want to go first with that?
Yeah, I dropped the whole opening statement thing.
Oh, okay.
I started writing like a format for one, and I was just like, well, if we're just gonna talk, I can give you my position on some things, and you can give me your position on some things if you'd like to.
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll go first. So, my biggest problem with capitalism is that it's I don't know, like it's a th I kind of want to put this in a nice way, but
No, no,
I
no,
think capital.
bro. We're gonna relax, and you go as hard or as soft as you feel. It's fine.
Okay.
I'm gonna take no offense over it. Trust me, dude. I'm not here to attack you in any way, shape, or form. I'd rather just like
Yeah.
get to the root of how you like your reasoning. That is like really the most important thing to me out of this whole thing. So, just go as hard. If you hate it, if you however you feel, it's fine.
Yeah, so I think my biggest problem is that capitalism is not democratic, and that's why I advocate for a more market like socialism with like regulations and such, and like government safety programs like
Mm-hmm.
universal healthcare for all and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So could you explain a little bit more by what you mean by market socialism? Like
Yeah.
like as much of the meat and potatoes of that as you can give me.
Yeah, so basically, market socialism, it's just like there's like a certain level of control that the workers have over the workplace, and it's flexible, and it's flexible in that like if you like your boss already, you can just elect them, and like I guess there would be terms and stuff. I haven't really worked out the specifics, but it's just like workers own the means of production, and
Hmm.
also regular like there's still money and stuff like that.
Okay. Okay. That's it's very that's very complex. The some of the things that you just sort of went over just now are extremely complex, and they're mechanisms that are governed by the decisions of millions and millions of people.
Yes.
It's never just a small body of people, right? And in the capitalist system, that's how it's governed, by millions and millions of people. It's not necessarily governed by a very small elite group of people.
Are you talking about like are you talking about
Well, I
like the
mean,
cut like
I'm ri-
the concept that like the customers like decide what the product is and stuff like that?
well
Like the
in terms of how the markets are driven, because there isn't necessarily empirical data that says that the price of bread should be 2.99.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So if you were to try to engineer society in a way there where you said the price of bread is going to be 2.99 and it will never change, that unfortunately would destroy the market of bread. I mean, to give you a sort of an example, are you familiar with German Democratic Republic? during the 1980s. Are you familiar with what happened there with Germany with the fall of the Berlin Wall?
Not really. Educate me.
Well, I'll give you just a quick rundown.
Yeah.
I'm kind of versed in it. I'm not. Now if I miss something, people out there can go ahead and correct me in the chat, or you can go ahead and leave a comment below. The GDR, right at the fall of World War II, Germany was split in half, right? And you had West Germany and you had East Germany. And
Yeah.
ostensibly, the Soviets were in control of the east half, whereas Western Germany had become under the control of the Allied powers, right?
Yeah.
So what happened was they built a big old wall there. And between 1949 and 1989 was the life of the German Democratic Republic, which is what some people point to as the example of the working socialist utopia, right? But what they don't do is they don't necessarily point at the most horrible and horrific instances that took place inside there, with hyperinflation. And they were able to artificially keep the cost of living down. But it was very, very cheap to actually live there. But the problem was there was no actual train of products. You could wait 10 years to get a car. The price of bread skyrocketed, and a lot of people didn't really understand what was going on. And by the time it was too late, GDR couldn't borrow any more money. The Soviet Union had pulled out, and they were no longer giving any more support because there was nothing to be wrought from that situation. And obviously, the USSR was crumbling itself at the time, and getting ready to split into all those satellite states. So during that time, you had the Stasi, which was like the sort of secret police of the GDR, which basically infringed on every possible right you can think of. And over 1,000 people had to escape and under gunfire, under attacks over this wall to get to the free side. The conditions started off great and grandiose, and they felt that like the utopia had arrived. Unfortunately, it deteriorated very, very quickly because the smallest thing that they missed was the interaction between people. We already form our groups in society, right? We don't necessarily need to break these groups any further or change them because we naturally form into these groups, just like we naturally form into contracts with each other, like
what do you mean? Services. What do you mean like groups, like social groups?
Well, it all starts at the lowest rung. You have your family. Then you have your friends, then you have your neighborhood, and then your town. And that's the idealistic way to sort of look at how we form groups. However, when you look at it from, and I don't want to sound evil when I say this, but the leftist, communist, socialist, that sort of way doesn't necessarily break people down by that group. They break them down into other groups, which can be harmful, like race, gender, things like that. And when you play race and gender against each other, you sort of mess with the fabric of society a little bit.
Well, I mean, doesn't that just come with like race war ideology and stuff like that? Like you can still be like leftist and you don't have to exactly go with like crazy like race war rhetoric.
No, you're right. You're 100% right. There are people of conscience of every light of thought. You have people on the left who are amazing people who have great ideologies and great ideas for how to run society, and you have people on the right that are the same way. It's the crud from the left and the right are the things that sort of ruin the system. It's the AOCs and the sort of the inflammatory rhetoric from people like Hannity. Yeah, I personally don't like people like Sean Hannity and Gutfield. These are kind of assholes that are throwing fire, flame on the fire with their strings of insults. But then again, you got Brian Stelter and CNN and all these other people on the left. And I'm not just going to the news. I'm not talking about people's beliefs, but this is what we see in the dichotomy of society, this polarization.
Well, what's so bad about AOC? I'm just curious.
Well, a lot of things. She's very heavy on the propaganda. She went to the border to take these pictures that were really just ridiculous and propagandish, and I'm not saying things like that don't happen on the right, but you can tell that what she's saying is sort of coming from this script that doesn't have any real factual basis, like the idea of the Green New Deal. I'll throw in this one piece, and then I'll let you take it from there. I don't want to feel like I'm overshadowing you with the talking. But let's take a look at the Keystone Pipeline. Right now, AOC and everyone were all happy when the Keystone Pipeline got shut down. However, America is still going to be using oil, and we're still going to get that oil. The problem is the price of oil is now going to go up. So because to pipe it in is safer than to put it into trucks and put it into tankers and ship it across, because we're still going to use it. We still have to conduct business in America. You're just going to make the cost of that business go up. So we've seen a 34% rise in gas since Biden has taken office, right? This is because of this idiotic thing about shutting down this Keystone pipeline. This is the safest, most geologically friendly. Now, when they say something like clean coal, we manufacture coal and petroleum products cleaner than any other country, right? By taking away our ability to do so, and by making us not energy independent, means that outsources are going to outpace us in the market. Russia, China, and they make it through any standards they want. They're not following an EPA. They're not following the World Health Organization. They're not following any of that. They're just going to make it. It's going to be filthy, and they're going to sell it dirt cheap, and they're going to ruin us in the market. And this is a bad thing for us and the petrodollar. So, when you realize if you can do it safely and manufacture it safely, because we still have to use it. All of our systems, the power you're using right now is generated off of that. So it's all, and there's no way that green energy. I worked in the solar energy industry. I've installed many solar arrays on houses. I can tell you firsthand that's not enough. It's not going to be enough. Even with battery backups, you're going to need a Generac. You're going to need gas, natural gas. You're going to need some sort of coal power. You're going to need it. Nuclear is the best, but unfortunately, there's too many people against it, even though it is technically safer. But,
so
I've gone.
Were you saying? Yeah, were you saying were you saying that like the Keystone pipeline is like was the safest way to get the oil, transport the oil?
Well, it's the safest way that we have here to transport oil through the pipeline. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Because then you have to put it in trucks, and those trucks now have to bring it across roads, and you have to put it in ships where you risk spillage, you risk accidents, and those obviously happen a lot.
Yeah. I don't really know that much about this like particular issue.
Well,
like
I brought this up only as a staple point when I wanted to say this is just a leftist piece of propaganda ideology that's really stemming from like AOC and those type of people, because they're saying, well, we're going to shut this pipeline down and it's going to be green energy for everybody, and she's not telling the truth to the American people. This is one of the reasons. The truth is that it is much safer to do it through that pipeline, and that pipeline leads off into hundreds of other pipelines, which creates thousands and thousands of American jobs. And these people who have been working in the energy industry, which is, let me tell you, it's an ass-busting job. These people are career men. These are people who study this. They go to school. This is training. They can't go and code. It's impossible. It's just, and it's kind of an insulting thing to say, oh, you can go work somewhere else, go work in green energy. When green energy boom happened back in 2013, I was working in that industry. The moment the government subsidies dried up, that's it. No one was getting solar anymore. Well, the moment subsidies drive, because they were subsidizing 40, 50, 60% of people's solar arrays, and they were getting panels installed on the top of their house in their backyard, things like that. They get hooked up to an inverter, and then they get tied into the grid. They get tied into their bus bar, their breaker bar. And you're supposed to be able to turn the clock back and get some money, but the truth is you only get about 8 cents a watt on payback when you're paying 23 cents a watt. So when you really break it down to the finest piece of math, sure, it's good to supplement the grid system and take off some of the pressure, but it's in no way is it a solution.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, this is kind of off topic. Like, I wasn't really preparing.
I ran away with it, but you wanted to know why people like AOC are kind of bad, especially for honest people on the left who want to talk about policy and who do want to try and fix things. People like AOC in the front, and those people are the people that are standing in the way of the people on the left who could actually be worked with, like the Tulsi Gabbards. You know what I mean?
I don't like Tulsi Gabbard.
A lot of people don't, but let me tell you, that woman, she's an incredibly smart woman. I'll tell you, very smart. She should have been if she was the Democratic elect, Trump would have lost like you would not believe. Trump would have not got president, and they wouldn't have Biden to deal with. She's a military person.
Yeah.
She's an America First person.
She's probably better than Biden. I don't like Biden either.
Yeah, Biden is, unfortunately, we're stuck with him now. and we're gonna have to deal with it. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and cry over it, because we got what we got, but we now have to reap what we sow. And so far we've seen unemployment skyrocket. We've seen a lot of lies come out of the media right now. We've seen so much terrible things happen, and we're only in like the first 60 days, less than that. So, it's really not gonna get better, dude. Like, taxes are gonna go up hard. Only 9% of the spending bill actually goes to COVID. The rest goes to their payoffs, and it's like that's 100% proven too. And it kills me, but what are you gonna do? I'm not in Congress. I can only talk about the issues with fine gentlemen like yourself.
Thank you. Yeah. So I don't know. I think I just want to go back to like the beginning of like.
Yes, let's go back to socialism. I apologize.
Yeah.
I apologize for the tirade, but I was just going on about the whole why people like AOC are bad. So, but yes, socialism. Now, in terms of the worker-owned means of production, I'm going to personally say that I don't think that this is a possibility. And I know that a lot of people on the left and Democrats point to, not necessarily Democrats, socialists, democratic socialists point to things like worker co-ops as sort of like the success story of what it could be in a sort of democratized socialist work environment. However, there is a big difference between the voluntary action of a worker co-op and the involuntary action of millions and millions of Americans. See, worker co-ops sprung up under capitalism. It was about the freedom of choice. You were able to get the 5 best carpenters and say, you know what, we're going to go and start our own carpentry union. And 6 years into the game, they're building their own houses, they're doing their own projects, and they're making money because they were successful. The most competent people usually come together and form those groups, those companies. That's why a couple of guys can, get together and create an LLC in their garage and bring you, Microsoft and Google. You see what I mean?
So I fail to see how that has anything to do with capitalism.
Well, it has to do with capitalism because if you have choice, you don't have choice when everybody is relegated to being forced into a system where they don't have the choice to leave that and go somewhere else. See, the models don't necessarily add up. Let's say you have the democratized workplace, right? Let's say we have a company of 100 workers, and these 100 workers make widgets, right? Now, these widgets are priced out. Everybody, we know what our materials are. That's fine. But here's the problem. In order to progress in this company, you have to campaign for the next job because it's all based on elections. So everybody's going to be campaigning with each other, and you're always going to have a dissatisfied margin. So somebody is always not going to be satisfied with who their boss is. It's not like once this happens, everybody gets happy to choose the boss that they want to have. In life, you can't choose the boss that you have. You have to do the most diligent work that you can
under capitalism
to progress. However, under socialism, you necessarily don't have that option either. Think about how many managers there are, and who would be running these elections. How are things decided? These endless strings of meetings that the business would be having. I hardly could see a path forward to a productive company that way.
Yeah, I can see how that's kind of that's like overcomplicated. I'm personally trying to figure out like who would run the elections and stuff like that. Or like, yeah,
how could corruption not seek into something on a micro scale like that if it already does it on the macro scale?
What do you mean?
Well,
what do you mean, corruption?
Well, corruption is always going to happen. So that's something. So if you factor in dealing with corruption, you're able to deal with it as it comes, and that's why sort of capitalism, is able to adjust. It adjusts easier to things than the socialist market does, because it can brings you products and services, and this has been admitted to by socialists in history. Capitalism brings you a level of products and services that socialism just simply can't. It's not going to manufacture products and goods to the people at a pace, because everything is based on the individual decision making and not centralized decision making. So if this company we were talking about are making their decisions on how cheaply they're going to get their materials and the quality of the build of their materials, if somebody outpaces them with better decision making, better materials, they're going to bring a better product to the market faster, and it's going to be purchased by the people who are in that society. So that's going to drive the price of those two items. If you try to use some sort of empirical scale, which I don't necessarily think exists, I've never seen one, empirical data to judge that these things are supposed to remain this price, you're going to tank the market for it, and you'll never have enough supply.
Well, are you talking? So, are you talking about a planned economy? Because I do not advocate for a planned economy.
Unfortunately, if you advocate for planned work society, you also advocate for a planned economy. There's no way around it.
Wait, planned what?
Well, the democratic the social democratization of the workplace is a planned economy. You see what
Is
I mean?
it?
Yes. How wouldn't it be?
Sorry, I just have to.
No, no worries, no worries. I'm not trying to throw
Yeah.
trick questions, but once you have a set of rules, because I'm under the impression that this has to be enforced by law. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So who makes the law?
The government,
Right. So who enforces that law at the point of a gun?
the state.
The government.
Yeah.
Which is the state? Necessarily, the government. The government in Tennessee is different than the government in Florida. Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
But who enforces? Who is the big daddy? The federal government. The federal government's reach goes across the state. A cop from Minnesota doesn't necessarily have jurisdiction to investigate a crime in Washington. But not federal agents. They go everywhere, and they enforce the law everywhere. And federal law and the federal crimes are on a whole different scale than state law. Some things are just out of the hands of states because it's just too big. And we're talking about the livelihood of millions and millions of people.
Well, yeah, I was talking about like state and like theoretic or not theoretical, but like just the definition that like a lot of anarchists like to use a entity with a monopoly of violence over a certain area.
Right, entity with a monopoly of violence over a certain area. Think about the wording of that, monopoly of violence. So ostensibly anybody who's stronger runs that area, and it doesn't have to be the local law enforcement. You could have a Negan spring up in the the hills of the Appalachian Mountains, and then all of a sudden, guess what? That area belongs to him now.
Okay, so a planned economy is a type of economic system where investment, production, and the allocation of capital goods takes place according to economy-wide economic plans and production plans. So under my system, market socialism, this would not take place because it has a market.
But the market is dictated by the empirical, like an empirical table of data. Like how else is the market being driven? So, all right. So the main
Just like it would in a capitalist system.
So really, what you're talking about is Rhine capitalism.
What do you mean, Ryan? Okay,
A mixture of capitalism and socialist mechanisms.
Well, I don't like my system doesn't really have much to do with like the like economy and like trading of goods. I mean, unless you want to talk about the regulations that I would like to have in place, but it's more of just like it's just like democratize the workplace, and that's pretty much it.
So really, then it becomes a body of large corporations freely competing against each other, and inside the large corporations, the people who work there own it and operate.
Yeah.
All right.
Or they elect managers and whatever.
All right. I think the biggest problem with that, I think, was a point that I sort of made. One of the biggest problems, and there's many, but one of the biggest problems with that, I think, has to do with competency. I mean, we have the corruption level, but let's not go there because it's not necessarily a factor you can put into numbers. However, competency is a factor that you can put into numbers. So let's say about 10% of our society, about 10% has an IQ of around 82, 83, right? This means that they could carry out basic functions, right? This means that they could do something like, a cashier job. This means that they could do something menial that doesn't really have necessarily a lot of skill, right? Now, these people and their level of competency, I'm not necessarily sure that it would be indicative of being better or worse if they have the ability to vote who their bosses are. But here's the thing: their work is relative to what what they're being paid is relative to what they put in. So the janitor gets paid the janitor's salary. The CEO who does 50 times, who gets paid 50 times what the lowest worker at his company makes, doesn't necessarily do 50 times the work, but his management of the company is what allows it to become profitable. And each one of these companies is managed by the people who are hired for the job, not elected, hired. So
Yes.
we see this in politics all the time. We elect people that just completely mess up the job. Let's take a look at Andrew Cuomo. We elected him, and he came out and he touted this, and there was scandal and this and that. We didn't elect him based on any empirical data. He just ran a better campaign to get elected amongst his constituency. So a person who would have been hired, interviewed and hired for the job, would have been reviewed on their credentials and their value, what kind of value they're going to be added to the company. They were not elected. You could wind up electing the same types of people who make poor decisions and run the company into the ground, because you have that in capitalism. You just have it in a more natural way. If you make a bad decision and you overpay for materials and you underpay your staff, your company is going to hurt and it's going to suffer, but they could fire you. You see, if you are elected, that company is going to go down. That company is going to go down with you. I mean, you'd have to come. You have to come up with. You're going to devalue the company in a way that makes pretty much whatever you put into it worthless.
So, would you levy this same criticism against like a democratic, like, would you levy the same criticism against the United States? Because I mean,
100%.
Okay, so what do you think we should do about that on like a state level?
Here's the problem, and I don't necessarily find this a problem so much more as I find it the solution. Our ability to have this conversation right now, what me and you are doing in this room and what everybody out there doing listening, is trying to see this point of view across and understand where I come from, where you come from. That's all it takes. All we need is more open dialogue and campaigning. That transforms into a movement. And that's really the meaning of grassroots. Unfortunately, you have powers that will try to sway you. This new generation of very younger people think it's cool to be sort of communist, anarchist, socialist, it's sort of the hip new, and I'm old enough to see it progress, because 10 years ago, let me tell you, this wasn't a thing. Socialism was nowhere. No one was proud to be a socialist. No one anywhere was proud to be a socialist 10 years ago. This is something that comes and rears its head up, and it always comes up with a very sort of younger group. And I hear them say words like bread pilling, and I hear them say, and I think about socialism as the enemy of my grandfather. This isn't, you know what I mean? Like I think about all these failed socialist societies over time, and I'm like, I can't necessarily jive with that.
Okay, so the question I was asking was like you brought up the issue of competency, and so my question about that is, would you levy that against like a democratic government?
Sure, absolutely. There are people who get elected by running convincing campaigns, and then when they get into office, they completely mess things up, and then they'll get recalled or they'll get impeached. And the impeachments where everybody is on, we have a system in America where when everybody is on board for an impeachment, guess what? It's happening. But if we're divided 50-50 and it's only because one side hates the other side, you can run your impeachment, but it's not going to remove the person from power, because it's clear that it's not bipartisan. It's a very partisan point of view. That's
okay.
For example, the impeachment of Donald Trump. Now, if you look at the impeachment of Bill Clinton, he had 17 criminal referrals. He was accused of so many really horrific things. He had to go. He still wound up finishing out his term, but it was bipartisan. When it came to Trump, it wasn't bipartisan at all.
Yeah. So, and like, what would your solution to this problem be in like at a governmental level?
Well, you want to hear something in practical terms, you have to actually get into politics and be a part of your local politics. You have to start low.
Yes.
It starts in your community. It starts with your friends, and it starts with your, I don't know how many local town meetings you go to, but they hold them all the time. Chamber of Commerce meetings. Who's setting up a business? How are these votes going? If you want to be heard, you can have the opportunity to be heard.
So basically, your solution is like better voter like education on like certain issues.
Well, one of the problems is that some people can outright lie, and it causes polarization. It's very, very hard to argue with somebody who's arguing from dishonesty. So you have people
Oh yeah.
who just don't want to hear what you have to say. They don't want to participate or have a conversation. I hate you because of your position, and that's that. Those people are nearly, I want to say, impossible to reach. There's really no nugget of information that you're going to give them right now that's going to magically awaken them to your point of view. The only way to reach these people is to let them live life. I noticed that a lot of, like I was saying before about the wave of these new young socialists, a lot of them are very young and they haven't actually lived life. They haven't seen what third world countries actually look like. Some of them have no idea how good they have it in America. I've been to third world countries myself personally. I've seen what war and destruction has done to other places, aside from what running terrible government does. We can see through the examples of history how bad trying to dictate markets and trying to dictate these things through centralized planning has completely ruined it. Can I read you a quick quote from Dr. Ludwig von Mises?
Go ahead.
I sent you the book. I sent you a link to the book. It was
Yes, I read like the first couple of chapters.
It's actually a quite an interesting book. He's one of the founders of praxeology.
My biggest problem is that he conflates socialism and communism a lot.
Yeah, well, the real difference between socialism and communism is one seeks to privatize the end product of production, and the other one doesn't. That's really the only difference. Otherwise, they're very, very close in terms of how in implementation.
What do you mean privatize the end goal, the product?
So in a socialist society, you can still buy stuff. In a communist society, you can't.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I mean. So there were companies under socialist regimes that were, although they were centrally planned. Take a look at, all right, so take a look, I'm sorry to break this, but the difference between Tokyo and the difference between Beijing, right? The biggest difference between Tokyo and the biggest, Tokyo's in Japan, excuse me. I'm talking about the two major cities in China. You have Beijing, and then you have
Hong Kong.
And Hong Kong, yeah. So the difference between them is that one is. Am I conflating this? I'm sorry.
Conflating one.
Because one of the cities was run. I'm sorry. I'm getting a little confused. One of the cities is run under has capitalist rule. You can have private.
Yeah, Hong Kong.
Yeah, and the rest of I'm sorry, I got a little confused. I was reading something when I said that.
Yeah.
I apologize, but and they're there waving American flags, saying they need the First Amendment. They need the ability to speak. They want to keep.
Oh yeah, fuck China.
They want to keep their independence because of the Chinese communist reach. The CCP has their fingers in every company. They know every plan. Nothing is secret from them, and they say how things. That's why they're able to manipulate their currency. They say how companies dictate themselves, and that's why we can't do business with many of the companies from China and it was England that was helping to preserve the rights of Hong Kong. Yes, Hong Kong and Beijing. I apologize about getting those wrong. I sound like a dullard right now. That's what I meant. Hong Kong and Beijing, and the difference and the major difference between the two is that one is, representative of what everything capitalism has to offer, and the other is not. But going back to what I was going to say about the quote from Dr. Ludwig von Mises. Now, I'm glad that you read a little bit about him, and he does have some kind of kooky views on race, but what I can point out is he published a paper. And in the paper, let me just pull it up here. I'm sorry, I'm taking forever. See, I did copy some notes here. Okay. So, Dr. Mises, as a social rationalist, part 6, Social Evolution as an Ideological Struggle. That was the name of the paper. This is a quote, an excerpt from there. Quote, "The actions of individuals with regard to their fellow men and of already formed groups of individuals with regard to other groups before any act of barter takes place, the idea of mutual exchange of goods and services must be conceived. It is not necessarily that the individuals concerned become aware of the fact that such mutuality results in the establishment of social bonds, but in the emergence of the social system. The individual does not plan and execute actions intended to construct society. His conduct and the corresponding conduct of others generates social bodies. So this is sort of this was published in 1966, and it's on page 188. This is sort of pretty much everything that I kind of bring to the table. We are going to do things naturally as human beings. We come together and we form groups and we make deals with each other. If you try to if you try to plan that from the top down, it ruins everything. It ruins.
But I don't advocate for that.
Right. But that's a pretty compelling argument, you don't think? Because we come together and we create our own social bonds. So the idea of the mutual, from the quote, the idea that the mutuality of what we're doing with exchanging our services in our already formed groups. So your family, your town, your neighborhood, whoever you go to, you go to Walmart with your friend. That's a group going there to understand that there's a mutual exchange going on there. You're going there to get something in exchange for something, and there's the benefit. There's a causal benefit. That's what creates markets. That is the mechanism. But if you don't have that, you don't have markets.
So you're saying, like, if I don't have like the groups that you form are necessary for markets.
No,
right?
They already form without you knowing it. Your interaction with other people are what form the market. It's a causal.
Okay.
It creates the causation of social bodies.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Our exchange, our conduct in that exchange is what's going to dictate the quality of our social body. So if we conduct ourselves well and we have a mutual exchange, you're happy with whatever your purchase or whatever, and I'm happy with what my compensation, whatever exchange we had, so long as it is mutual and we conduct ourselves well, that is indicative of a well-operating social body.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, so you can't necessarily have that under a socialist system because you can't plan a market predetermined.
Again, I don't advocate for the planning of markets though.
Right.
I advocate for like a market with like some sort of regulation.
Oh, I still agree that there should be regulation, even in, like, I'm not one of those anarcho-capitalist people.
Yeah.
I'm not a Stefan Molyneux. That's horrible. A 5-year-old should not be able to go to the store and purchase heroin. That was an insane thing for him to say, and no. So we have to have market regulation. We have to get rid of crony capitalism and corruption, but that is a battle that we're going to fight forever. Wherever there is a way that people are going to try and benefit, and it doesn't matter if it's socialism or capitalism, they're going to try to do so. These are what we know as the criminal underworld. These are the people who will, by all means and any means necessary. This is robo-scammers now. This is just a new digital age of the digital mafia, sort of figuring out a way to siphon millions of dollars off of unsuspecting people in society. They did it in the 1940s with bootleggers. They did it with numbers runners, the mafia. It's just always going to exist, and it's something that we have to have an active body to fight. But it's the market that will drive what our prices are. Now, if you think a company is being run bad because of your elected leader, well, it might not be the case. Somebody might have just made a better product than you. So you oust him and you try to elect another person. I mean, the idea of holding an election at Ford, like the company, Ford Motor Company, sort of like, it blows my mind. There's no way that it would run properly if you had to consult everyone on who the next manager or boss is going to be.
Can I hear your reasoning with that? Because you made a claim, and can I just have something like, can you just tell me like why that wouldn't happen?
Why it wouldn't necessarily happen? Well, because you have to have a hierarchy.
Because we already have that like on a governmental level, like we can elect people and stuff like that. Yeah,
sure. For our governmental body, which is to enact law.
Yeah.
Companies aren't in charge of enacting law. They're in charge of bringing products, goods, and services to the people within the society. They're charged with they're valuing a society. And the government, if you put the government in charge of those things, you're going to have problems. And that's sort of kind of how it's always been because when the government gets involved, usually overreach, overspending, big government is not good for the society. When they come into your lives and they tell you what you can do and what you can't do, it's not good. I'm not saying that markets shouldn't have regulation. Of course they should have regulation, but the main reason you can't have elections within like large companies is because there's no way anything would ever get done. You would have to have an endless string of meetings. Then who is there to now decide on how the company is actually run is based on an election, not based on competency. So you don't have to be the best at your job to win an election.
Well, isn't an election in and of itself like a test of competency?
No, because neither. That's just like saying a debate is an example of an academic. A debate is a perfect example. A debate is an example of academia. It's not, because I can, like, if you could have two people,
Right.
you could have two people debate, and you could have one side come with facts and the other side come with just posturing, and the people in the audience or anybody who's watching sides with the person who's posturing. That's like the conundrum. You know what I mean? How is it possible that you came with nothing but facts and logic and still lost the debate? That's
But
why it's not yeah, go ahead.
this is just like a broader problem with like democracy.
Oh,
This isn't like a problem.
Sure.
Yeah, so this isn't really a problem with like democratizing of the workplace.
Right, but I think you could get away with more on a smaller scale campaign or election than you could on a larger scale, which is actually, that's not necessarily true considering what went down with this last one. Who knows? The shenanigans are up in the air right now with the rules being changed at the last minute in some states. Who knows? I mean, if you can honestly say that you don't think there was any kind of election fraud that goes on the big scale, what's to say that it wouldn't completely take over smaller companies?
I mean, that was what the Department of Homeland Security said. They said that the election wasn't rigged.
Yeah, sure. Well, Department of Homeland Security said that, sure, but
Trump's Department of Homeland Security.
Well, it's kind of our Department of Homeland Security if you think about it. I mean, because if we look about,
I mean, he appointed the officials, right?
Well, yeah, but he doesn't appoint like the working body of the place. He doesn't appoint hundreds and hundreds of people that work underneath him, and those people are all hired based on their ability to perform a job, not their ability to be liked by everyone, because that's what an election comes down to. How well liked are you? Like when it's an election that goes out to millions and millions and millions of people, that's very hard, very, very hard to do. I personally don't think things were very kosher in the last election. I personally don't think that, but there's only small instances, and I can't necessarily prove it outright, so I wouldn't bother taking a position on it until more evidence came out. But slowly, every other week, I've already heard of a couple of people getting arrested here and there for furnishing thousands and thousands of votes and drop ballots and things like that. So there was definitely some fuckery was afoot in the last election, absolutely. But I'm not the guy to prove it. You know what I mean? There are people out there who are trying, and they have some evidence. But the problem is the Supreme Court justice threw it out on standing. In other words, they did not review the evidence. That's what that means. They threw it out on standing. They took a vote, and they took a vote as to whether they were going to try the case, and the vote failed. I think it was 7-2. So
didn't like Rudy, weren't like the people involved with it? Didn't they like not really make any like actual claims? Because
no, they did. They did make very, very real legal claims. An actual signed affidavit is a very real legal document, and you can go to jail for perjury. And hundreds of affidavits came out, hundreds of them. People signed them, and they testified in court. And when they gathered all this evidence and presented it before the Supreme Court took a vote. They said, "Are we going to try this case?" And it failed 7-2.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look up more about that.
Yes, 7 of the justices were against it, and 2 were for it. As far as I understand, that was at least one of them. I know there was 3 that was sitting before the Supreme Court, and they all got thrown out on standing. In other words, they didn't review a single moniker of evidence. What they did was the case comes up, the docket number, they say, "Are we going to try this case?" They do it, they take their vote, and when they vote against, they say no, and it basically gets thrown out. It can't go anywhere else after that. So all of his appeals and everything got thrown out on standing, not because of evidentiary finding.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's a little hurtful, but it is what it is, and I think they had to do that because if they would have called into question the integrity of the American election, that would have actually hurt us a little bit more, big time, because they would have had to been huge departmental investigations, and you can already see people getting in trouble with the FISA court stuff in terms of investigating Trump. Remember, those people fabricated some nonsense to get FISA warrants to investigate Trump just to spy on him. And that sounds like a Hannity line, I know. But when you actually cut it down to the bare bone, that's exactly what happened. And that's terrible to think that actually happened here. But I'm getting off topic again. I'm sorry. Going back to how a company has worked. You have to have the people who are most qualified to run, not the people who are the most popular. Somebody who is really popular could get into a position of power and completely say...
But I could make this same claim about a government. Like, you have to have the one monarchist who's the most competent.
Well, then
like
I think what you're saying is every company would have to sort of really have their own constitution then, because you're saying that a government could fall for the same reason, and you're right. However, we have a constitution. We have constitutional provisions and an entire law body, 3 branches of government. A checks and balance system that is like none other the world has ever seen. So to keep this big behemoth ship chugging along every single day, big behemoth ship of America, with our industrial capacity and a per capita GDP of over $50,000 per person, I mean that's a lot. That is a lot. And if we take a look at what we actually produce in America and at the other countries, how they produce things, we do it cleaner, we do it better, we do it faster, and that's all done by the free market. The free market has come up with solutions for things that government spending could never. Remember, the government didn't come up with this vaccination. They didn't. Some people had this idea of Donald Trump sitting in his basement mixing beakers and creating the vaccine himself. It's psychotic. No, he threw money at it and he said, make it happen now. And it's exactly what had happened. And with all the other nonsense of, Biden saying, oh, we didn't have a vaccine when he came to... What are you talking about? There's over millions of people already vaccinated.
Did Biden really say that?
Yeah, he said it a bunch of times, and it was like killing me. I was like, they're gonna eat him alive on Fox.
Yeah.
But you say that could happen to a government. Well, that could happen to a government, but our government has a very strong checks and balance system. And when people get on board, when people believe what's going on, we can use this checks and balance system. Right now, the Democrats are in charge of all 3 chambers. All 3 chambers of government. So anything that they want to put up, they put up, i.e. this $1.9 trillion spending bill. They are in total power. Now, when everybody realizes, oh my God, this is going really, really bad, we need someone who's responsible to take over and control some of the spending, you're going to see in these next 2 years, Congress is going to flip about 8 or 9 seats. A couple of these congressmen are going to lose their job. They're not going to get reelected because of how poorly their states were run. And I guarantee you the 4 swing states are going to have a serious check in the next 2 years. That's one chamber of government. And then you have the senatorial elections, and then you have presidential election pretty much happening at the same time.
Yeah, okay. So, like, my argument here is just, like, why shouldn't this apply to a government? Like, it seems to me like you're throwing out all of the ideals that we have of democracy to defend, like, corporations. And so basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make you think about how this would affect a governmental body.
Well, it does, and then when it does, we have our constitution and our checks and balances. See, a corporation doesn't have its a constitution, doesn't have checks and balances. So if you're thinking about running just a straight-up election to elect people, it's going to be based on popularity. You don't have, and you have nothing in the way to sort of like you have to come up with a model. I suppose is really what I'm trying to understand, because I understand the model of the U.S. government. What I don't understand is a model where a corporation, an independent corporation, could be run like a government in terms of the elections and being able to elect your bosses and the people who run you, I suppose, so you could be sort of happy with the people that tell you what your workday is. But that's not really how work is supposed to be dictated. If you don't have someone who tells you what to do and how to do it, that doesn't mean that every boss you've ever had is a terrible person. I've had shitty bosses, and I've had great bosses. I've had bosses that taught me amazing things. But at the end of the day, they're still above me in the hierarchy. And the thing about that is there's always hierarchies, no matter how you put them together. Why not the most natural set of hierarchies let B take place, which is the free decision making of capitalism. Because if you work at a company and you're voting there and you own a stake of it, I suppose if you're voting, you own a stake of it. What happens if you're just not happy with that company anymore and you want to leave? Do you have to sell your stocks in that company? Could you proxy your vote? I mean, there are so many questions that I've never found a working model anywhere that could tell me that this system that's being proposed would actually functionally work, and it would work better than the system that we have.
Yeah, one sec.
The only examples I think I have in history are really what happened in the past, I want to say 150 years. I mean, even
What about worker co-ops?
Well, again, remember earlier on I mentioned that worker co-ops, I think, they're not indicative of what a socialist success. They're not, because they came about under capitalism. So, and everyone had the choice. If you're saying that every company has to be run this way, they no longer have a choice. Remember, the company itself is owned by the people who work and operate it, I suppose. But that doesn't mean that they don't hire outside bodies or outside work that are people who don't own stakes
Oh yeah,
in the
yeah,
company that do work for the company. Like, even I know of a worker co-op in Chicago that makes like windows and doors or something like that, and it's owned by the people. I don't think the janitor there is making any decisions on how that's being made. So again, you're going to have to decide who fits inside the hierarchy, who gets a say. Because if a janitor says, I don't like my position here, I want to go to a position over there, at some point you have to say, you're a janitor, clean the floor. You know what I mean? It's all relative.
Well, they wouldn't have like complete control over like what position they work at. That would be absurd.
Yeah, they wouldn't have any. Who would? How could a country? That's what I mean by how could a company become productive under the system. So really, what I want to see is a model where this could work that doesn't involve government intrusion. Because the government, again, like you said, would have to enact a law in order for corporations in America to operate this way.
Yeah.
Which means enforceable by penalty of, I suppose, jail or fines, right? Like anything else.
Yeah. No, the penalty would be we cut off their heads.
Yeah, that's a little tanky, my dude.
Yeah, I'm joking about that. I'm not a tanky. Tankies are very bad. I do not like tankies at all.
It's very Vaush of you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do you think Vaush is a tanky?
Vaush is kind of like an awful human being, in my personal opinion.
Really? Why?
Well, I mean, it's a lot of show and it's a lot of act. He's also, I've done a video and you actually commented. This is how we met.
Yeah.
You commented on my video.
That was when I was a little baby leftist.
That was only like a few months ago, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. What happened was Vaush is sort of a disgusting kind of person overall. Like he's lying to you. Straight up to your face. He'll do things. If you see Vaush's headstone after he dies, it's gonna say Vaush died, whatever, and at the bottom it's gonna say in quotes, "There have been studies." That's it. Because his main answer to everything is, there's been studies done that are my position. Here's an article, and 90% of the time, it doesn't actually push the agenda of what he's trying to say. It's usually just an opinion piece that agrees with him. He'll use studies of very weird, strange things to try to advocate for socialism, but there is no real working model of it anywhere. Any country that uses socialism has very, very hard problems with commodities, has hard problems getting products out to their people, has hard problems even keeping the lights on in some cases because of how much energy costs these people. Remember, these countries have to work on the world stage. They have to deal with everyone. And my favorite example of this is the founding of Rome. Rome was founded between Etruscan and a bunch of Greek archipelago cities or trading posts by Romulus, who killed his brother Remus, obviously, and he founded Rome. But Rome wasn't necessarily founded over that. It was a trading post between these two people. And what became Rome and all the traditions of it later on for 1,000 years were the mixing of these two cultures, and it happened naturally. When they founded Rome, like I said, it was a trading post. People were trading freely. When two bodies of people interact with each other and they barter and trade, they have a mutual understanding of benefit. So this is a natural thing that happens, and as a result, that exchange is natural. There's nobody from the top down saying that you have to, you have to elect the people who are in charge of you. You have to run this way. This is something that just naturally happens between people. I have something you want. You have something I want. Let's exchange. Right? And now that's markets economy, economic socialism. If you turn to the government and say you have to enact a law that says that these companies have to be run this way, it would basically ruin the entire American.
The law wouldn't be regulating the trading; it would just be regulating the production under which the product is produced.
So when you regulate production, you have to use arbitrary empirical data. You have to set numbers before numbers come out.
That's true.
Who gets how much materials? Who gets to decide what the price of bread is? And you go back to Germany. The price of bread was like at 30,000 Deutschmarks, or some crazy amount of money because of hyperinflation and overborrowing. And that's what we're going to get inflation here in America pretty soon. Not that.
But again, that's a problem of a planned economy.
Right, that's a problem of a planned economy. But if you're planning the company, you're planning the economy. If you're planning how these people are going to run their productions, because the government is saying now enacted a law that says that every business has to do it this way. That is controlling production.
That's just a critique of like regulation in general. Like, should we not have a minimum wage?
Well, that's another thing. I'm a little broken over these things because there are certain socialist type programs I feel like we need to have in America. Right, not Ryan capitalism, because if you go over to these countries that many socialists tout as being success stories, try to buy something. You know what the cost of living there is? Like 3 times the cost of living here, and the wages. They'll say, oh, we have a $15 minimum wage. Yeah, you know how much like a sandwich is there? It's like $40.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that would just be I don't know.
It's because of their production. They can't control their production the same way.
Well, what country are you referencing?
Like Denmark.
Denmark.
Scandinavian countries, Nordic countries, those countries that are basically ethnically homogenous countries that I think is funny is that they point to as examples of the utopia. It's like not really, not necessarily. It's not diverse at all, so you can't really use that as an example. But I'm digressing again. We were talking a moment ago about those proponents. I'm torn because I feel like you have to have unemployment. You have to have welfare, but welfare has to be geared towards getting people off of it, not continued welfare.
I thought you meant like you have to have people who don't have jobs. I was like, what?
No. You have to have the systems, the safety net, because we take a look at when you don't have the safety net, people fall through the cracks. And it's very hard to catch everyone. They're gonna fall through.
Yeah, and it also not having the safety nets makes the relationship between like a boss and an employee like much more coercive.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, you don't have any other choice, and some people may feel that way. But in America, what we have is the abundance of opportunity. When we talk about equality of opportunity over equality of equity, maybe we can move into that portion. The equality of opportunity means that everybody gets the opportunity. You have to make of the opportunity what it is presented to you. And now,
like a job?
Any opportunity that comes your way. And opportunities come your way in many shapes and forms. When you have equality of equity, everybody gets exactly the same. No one is afforded any greater opportunities. And if people have more, they will be taken from and given to those who have less. You would think that this is this sort of flowery language. Oh, it sounds good because we want the people with less to have more. Here's the problem: when everybody has exactly the same, you basically have a failure to innovate, and all of your products, everything tanks. You don't have the ability to innovate. Like I said, you don't have the ability to innovate. You don't have the ability or the incentive to create new products to then try against the market, because no one is able to have any more than the other.
So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not like a. I think the only like way. My ideology is like, I think the only way we can achieve communism is if everything is fully automated. So, but like if it's just like right now, I probably wouldn't advocate for communism.
Right.
So I don't believe in equality of equity, but I do believe in equity in the sense that we should give people with less more and like enough to live and stuff like that, and we should like people who are already well off, like why what is the reason to give them money?
Well, I want to take a moment here to actually credit that idea to you. That's actually a very important way to look at it. Even though you use a little bit of contemporary slang when you talk, like bread pilling and shit like that.
Oh yeah.
But in reality, you kind of just hit the nail on the head with the difference between what actual communism might be in about 150 years from now versus what the reality of today is. Now, in the future, in the way future, I'm talking about way after the dust has blown away from our bones. We are way dead. We are gone. Then, in that future, when AI and all those things start to sort of take over, the entire idea of what society is going to go through this new enlightenment phase and is going to change again. But I can promise you this: it's not going to be brought on by people thinking that there are 500 genders, and it's not going to be brought on by people thinking that socialism is the answer to all their problems. Because when you have socialism, you ostensibly have a dictatorship. You have someone who says this is how it is, and you have no other choice.
But socialism is in direct opposition to that.
Well, is it though? Because
yes, it is. That socialism is the democratization of the workplace.
Well, that's not the actual definition of socialism.
What is it?
Well, socialism is social engineering. It's an ideology of social engineering. How do you socially engineer society so that everyone gets to experience the equality of it? That's not a textbook definition. If you want to go through the textbook definition, we can definitely pull that up right now. But what you're talking about is is talking about is democratic socialism, like a Bernie Sanders kind of thing.
Sure. But I think what you're talking about is would be classified as communism.
Right. That's why the lines are so thin. That's like I was saying before. The lines are very thin between what actual communism and actual socialism is. But I wanted to credit you because what you're talking about in the future probably is what's going to happen. After overpopulation and automation takes place, that's not going to happen for a very, very, very long time. I promise you that.
Oh yeah. No, I completely agree with this. This is why I advocate for socialism in the meantime.
Well, I couldn't advocate for socialism in the meantime because again, the market isn't dictated that way. When we have machines that are automatically making bread enough to feed the world and it doesn't cost anything, it's going to change. It's going to be a game changer. When we have machines that are cloning and growing fish, we're not eating our oceans, that's going to be a game changer. See, there's going to be no point for anybody to sort of capitalize on something when it's free and abundant for the whole planet, like let's say solar power or oxygen. So once it becomes free and abundant to the planet, if energy becomes free and abundant to the planet, the whole dynamic changes. But we can't make that sort of assumption that okay, this is how it should be until then, because what we have right now is what we have. And as I said before, the markets have to be dictated by millions and millions of people making decisions, and those decisions, they have to be free to make those decisions. If you're hindering those decisions in any way, it's going to gum up the works of the system, and the prices of things will change. So most likely skyrocket as wages plummet, which is the example that we've had over time in history through socialist governments. They keep borrowing to sustain and borrowing to sustain because they're not generating anymore. I can't
I think that's kind of an oversimplification, though.
You're right. I mean, we're having an oversimplified conversation, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely.
we could have a moderated, straight up debate.
I could read a bunch of books before this.
Yeah, I've read a lot, throughout my time and throughout my experience, and so I figured we could just have more of a conversation, like we agreed. But if you want to have that kind of debate, I suppose we could have that kind of debate too. But I don't think that's very productive at this point. We see other people having a debate, and the truth is they're talking past each other. And for the first time, I actually feel like I'm talking to somebody.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
It's better that you keep your terminology and say things like bread pilling and commie and stuff like that if you want to say those things, because here's the truth: you're free to say anything you want.
Yeah.
You're 100% free. If this was the German Democratic Republic and I wanted to talk about being a capitalist, I would be beaten over the head and dragged under a stairs.
Well, yeah, but that's not really a problem with communism. That's authoritarianism.
Yeah, that is authoritarianism, which certainly can be born out of the power of those who are at the top. And when you have that kind of power, you certainly want to silence opposition. I'll give you an example. Oh, this is, well, no, that's anecdotal. Never mind. What I'm trying to say is that if you give the people that kind of power, they create, secret police. They create these things that silence opposition because obviously they want to maintain their power.
Yep. That's why I'm against capitalism.
Yeah, I see it happen in capitalism, but I also see a way to fight it. I don't see a way to fight it the other way around.
Well,
So with capitalism, if someone tries to silence me, I'm sorry, not with necessarily capitalism, with let's say free society, because remember, we're giving the government all this overreach to change what the meaning of a corporation is and how it's run. They become the dictators. They become the dictation of that's the
but
dictation of society.
they're already doing that through regulation, though.
Well, what do you mean by that? Because if they're doing that by regulation, like you have to regulate things, like we said before. You
Right,
can't
yeah.
you can't allow one company, like let's say there's this new product on the market and it has to take a carbonadium, the special thing that we can only order from one place. One company can't go there and buy everything. We have laws against stuff like that. We have
Yeah.
laws against monopolies. And
Oh, yeah,
when
definitely.
monopolistic things show up, we have laws that help us fight those monopolies. We force them into leveling the playing ground in a way that doesn't give them absolute power. So,
Mhm.
if you give one oil company all the power to sell oil in America, you have a problem. They can
Yeah.
shut off the pumps. So when Shell shuts off the pumps, Citgo's pumps are on. That's what creates. So if Shell wants to make money, guess what? They got to turn their pumps on. So they're not incentivized to, let's say, turn their pumps off for some political reason. If someone gives them a handout or says, hey, listen, maybe if you stop the flow or increase the price of oil to $60 or $70 a barrel just for this one cycle, we can make a couple of hundred mil extra, and nobody's going to say anything because we're the only oil supplier in
Yeah.
town. Or we're the only. When you have the markets able to compete with each other, that's a freedom of choice that you know what I mean? Like how could companies be able to do that if they were worried about electing like mid-level managers? You know what I mean?
Wait, can you repeat that last part for me?
Like how could a company accomplish that sort of competition on big market scale if they're worried about how they're going to elect like mid-level managers or like people who run the warehouse? You know what I mean? Like how are they able to do that if they're spending time worrying about elected positions and campaigning within companies? Every company would have their own campaigns and their own campaign slogans. It would be like 24 hours 7-day a week election year at every company, everywhere you go. Vote for so and so. It would become fucking psychotic so fast.
I guess.
Well,
I
think about it. What level of management do you think needs to be elected? How low down? So you got your first line supervisor, then you got your company supervisor, then you got your regional manager, and then you got your company manager, and then you got your CEO. At what level do you think we should start implementing elections?
uh maybe like a regional manager level.
Yeah, so he's running pretty big place. Got like about 1,000 people, whatever. He's got a campaign too.
Yeah.
For his area. What about the other managers? How did they get to their jobs?
They're hired? I don't know.
They're hired.
I haven't like really worked out the specifics. I just have like kind of a general idea.
But what you have is an enthusiasm for something that I don't think you can quite explain yet.
Yeah.
That's
I
that's sort of what and I'm not being mean when I say this. Like I said with Caskie, you and a lot of other people, your heart is in the right place. It really is. You're thinking along the lines of like societal well-being, right? You're the type of person that would like to have people go to a work environment that they can appreciate rather than fear or hate.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing that you're someone so young who's thinking about the idea of okay, we need to make these things better. How do we do that? Unfortunately, the flowery language of like early Marxism and things like that, I think creeps into younger people and makes them believe that it's possible through these means. It is possible. It's just not possible through these means. It's not possible through social engineering.
Well, I don't advocate for social engineering.
Well, if you do it, well, again, if the government enacts a law that says companies have to do X, Y, and Z, that's social engineering. That
No.
law says that the company has to hold, because now the government, let's say the government has enacted a law that says that the regional managers now have to hold elections in order to hold their positions, right? Are those government positions or are those company positions?
Here, one sec. I something.
No problem. It for me
Yeah.
it gets a little dicey in there. You know what I mean? It doesn't quite necessarily, because what happens if the government starts advocating for a certain somebody to take that position? You know, that could happen too. That guy's going to play ball with the local government, and before you know it, you got more people at the top and less people caring about the guy at the bottom.
One sec. Can you? I just went to close my door. What did you say right there?
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I was sort of grifting there. When you have, let's say what happens, what we said was that regional manager who's got like 1,000 guys underneath him from that company, the law says that that company has to hold an election in order for that guy to hold that position. Is that guy a government employee or a company employee? And if he's a company employee, what's to say that the government, or let's say a local government, like, you know, the local town commerce, doesn't slip their guy in there? And they slip their guy in there, and they give him the campaign money and the campaign contributions to get elected. Now, what we're talking about, you said before, yes, it can happen in the government, but governments have a constitution. They have a way to fight this kind of corruption, and it may take some time, and it may hurt us a little bit, but we can and do get the opportunity to fight this through the law. Through these companies, you don't necessarily get that kind of power. I mean, again, you'd have to work out the structure for that, but...
Couldn't the same thing happen under capitalism though, where like some local government decides to put one of their officials and make them apply for a job at a certain company?
Oh, not could it? It happens all the time, dude. Raytheon.
Yeah.
Right now, I think the new DHS guy is a former Raytheon employee, but you're not.
Oh yeah,
a
Ajit Pai?
Yeah, you're not supposed to notice that because he's black.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that's what he's doing. He's hired a bunch of old Obama holdovers, which were a lot of them worked for Raytheon, and a lot of them worked for these really, really awful big companies. And it's just like, it's kind of hurts me because I didn't see too many of that happening much of that happening in the Trump administration.
Yeah, isn't that what happened with Ajit Pai and like net neutrality too? Like Ajit Pai was like worked for Verizon. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No. You're right. I'm agreeing with you. Yes, it does happen even with the system that we have. However,
and so
we have as we have the freedom to be able to call that out and do something about it. We have laws. And look at Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom right now is getting recalled, and he's got 2 million signatures to something like that to do so. He will be recalled in California for the poor running of that state and how horrible California did especially the past 2.5 years. It was horrific what happened to that state. Mass flooding of immigration, the system's budgets failing. Basically every government system that they put in place, billions of dollars that they're spending on infrastructure, that's just failing. It's not doing anything about the homeless. The reason being is they decriminalized drug use. You go to San Francisco, you got people crapping in the street everywhere. This is not just me. It's all over YouTube and it's all over the internet. So anybody listening to this or anybody out there, Google it. Look what's going on in these districts. They're not going on in Nancy Pelosi's district, but they're going on everywhere else. And because of people like Gavin Newsom and because of the way the leftist people ran that state, they're going to recall Gavin Newsom. Nancy Pelosi has way too much power to be removed. The Crypt Keeper cannot. She's basically Mum Ra. She's not gonna. They can't kill her. She's the Undying. So there's nothing you can do about Nancy Pelosi. But the local leadership, yeah, they're gonna get axed, and they're gonna get axed in a bad way. And I guarantee you, they're gonna wind up hiring some Republican guy to fix it. You know, look at Florida. Ron DeSantis, Governor DeSantis down there is running Florida like a champ. His state's got the lowest infection rate. His state's got the lowest unemployment rate because he opened up without restrictions. He said everybody needs to go back to work. Everybody needs to go back to school. Countries overseas in Europe opened up. They went back to school. It's this power that they don't want to give up. Again, I'm sorry. I'm sitting here ranting again. I'm getting off topic. We were originally talking...
What about Vietnam that had like very strict mask policies and stuff like that? And then like they got done with it, and now their infection rate is like very, very extremely low.
I don't know about the numbers from Vietnam. I can't verify that. I would have to actually go on and verify that. I'll take your word for it right now. I don't know necessarily what the difference between the mask mandate had with the infection rate. I will say this though. As far as the infection rate goes with the mask mandate, actually the CDC released it. The masking that we've been doing since the mask mandates went the basically countrywide mask mandates pretty much went into effect has only had it was 0.5% and ended recently at 1.5% differential between the overall infection rate. So it was less than a 2% of the 100% of the infected that it prevented. So we're talking about a minimal amount of people that it actually did any good for. Very minimal. Like the amount of people could fit in your house.
And where was this?
I believe it was CDC. I probably can get those.
I mean, like where, like geographically? Sorry,
I'm talking about America.
In America? Okay, yeah.
So I don't know the infection rate for Vietnam.
Yeah, I just looked it up. They have like I don't know if this is like an all-encompassing thing, but they have like 35 deaths, which is probably like a lot less than like even like in my state.
Right.
And I think I haven't looked all of this up, but they had like some pretty strict restrictions on like going outside and like having masks and stuff like that.
Right. So I'm in New York, right? So I have the most strict of strict. I can't go anywhere without a mask on. I can't go into the store. I can't do anything without a mask on.
Yeah.
So you are, and what's really strange about this whole thing is there's a 94% comorbidity rate. So 94% of the people who died with something else or of something else while having COVID. Now, you can wade through the weeds between the people who got something and then COVID sort of tipped them over the top, or people who were recovering, let's say, from cancer and then got COVID and died, versus somebody who had COVID and got into a car accident. So that a lot of that, they say that only 6% of people who got COVID actually died from COVID. Now, you'd have to verify these numbers independently on your own, but that's the numbers that I had seen, and I was blown away by that stuff. And the fact that they implemented such strong restrictions when the mask mandate at the end of all of our studies told us that it only had like a 1.7% differential rate over the infection. And that was like, that's nothing. That's literally nothing. Yeah. So I can't, and they remember Fauci said, wear the mask, don't wear the mask, wear the mask, don't wear 2 masks, wear 5 masks. This guy has lost all confidence, in my personal opinion, as a medical doctor. When those guys in California came out and told us what the actual infection rates were, or I think it was in California, yeah, those doctors, and then they got silenced, which is nonsense. We're not supposed to be silencing people. So, yeah. But I keep going off in these tirades. I apologize.
Yeah, I think we've passed the 1 hour mark.
Well, if you wanted to call it quits, I mean, we could do it. We could have another debate another time if you like.
Yeah, we could do this some other time. Yeah.
Sure thing. I hope you got a little something out of the information that I presented here. I do appreciate you coming on and having a chat. And if you want to set this up again, we could do it again in a couple days if you want. We could change topics. We could do more formal. It's totally your call. So yeah, give us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll call it a night.
All right, cool. Just do like a introduction for myself or whatever.
Or an outro. Because
sure.
You're signing off to your people. I'm signing off to mine.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm Alex. I'm a leftist streamer, and sometimes I make videos and stuff like that. And you can find me. You can search up Anarcho Alex, and my channel will come up. Yes, small but growing.
Yes, there will be a link in the description for his channel below in my channel. I'm Jason Zem.
Same here.
I'm Jason Zem from You2oneDay, and I appreciate you guys stopping by and checking this out.
Yep.
If you have anything to say in the comments section below, let us know. I'll try to address those as soon as I can. Thank you, everybody, and have a good evening.